Tonight's presentation on Bible Health for Better Living is going to be on Does God Care? It's going to be part 1, and part 2 is going to be on genetics. And before I start getting into the presentation, I'd like to appeal to what you're passionate about. Is there something in your life that you're passionate about? And the reason I'm saying that is because when we're making decisions in our life, we tend to either choose to want to make a decision that's we think is going to give us some more pleasure, and so we want to either go that way, or we make a decision based on wanting to go away from something that we think is going to cause some pain in our life. Okay, and we tend to make those decisions. We don't might think about it consciously, but that's what's happening when we're trying to make a decision. And yet we know that we all have a passion for something. I don't know what that something is. Maybe it's swimming with the dolphins. Maybe it's snorkeling with guys like that. Maybe it's going hiking in the mountains, or being with the moose, or being out on the ocean. Or maybe it's camping, or going boating or fishing, or kayaking, or spending time at Heritage Park, or going skating, or biking, or working in your backyard, or gardening. Or maybe you like to go to nice gardens like this. Maybe you like to run in the ocean. Maybe you like to spend time with your grandchildren. Maybe you like to go for a moped or a scooter ride for your first time. Maybe you like going for Hummer tours. Maybe you like sitting on the edge of the Grand Canyon.
Oh, my goodness.
Maybe you like feeding the deer or feeding the birds. Or maybe you like skiing or laying around in trees or building sand castles. Or maybe you like serving those who are in need, who are less fortunate than you are. Here's a picture of my grandmother and my daughter Kirsten. A couple of years ago, actually about a year ago now, I got a call that Grandma was in the hospital. She'd broken her wrist and she was rushed to the Medicine Hat Hospital. She lives in Brooks, so I immediately jumped in the vehicle, went down to go visit her in the hospital. And as I was there talking to her, the first thing that she says, Dwayne, she says, I got to get better quickly. And her arm, it's black and blue and it's swollen up huge. It just looked gross. She says, I have to get better. She says, because I'm in the middle of making a blanket for a single mother who's going to be leaving the hospital soon. She just had her baby and she's going to be going home to a fatherless home. And that's what her passion in life is making blankets for these single mothers so she can deliver these blankets to the hospital while she's still in the hospital having the baby, so that when she goes home, the mother and the daughter or the son or whatever, that there's a homemade blanket for them to take with them home when there's no husband at home when they get there, because it's a single parent. And that's what she's been doing for decades upon decades upon decades. And at the age of 96, she turned 96 in December, she still has a passion for making blankets for little babies of single mothers. Anybody know what that picture is on the right? You don't know. It's the Great Pyramid of Giza. It began construction on 2580 BC. 20 years later, it was finished. It's 455 feet tall. It was the tallest man-made structure for 3,800 years. Anybody know what this is? Lincoln Cathedral in England. Took 223 years to build, 525 feet high. It was the tallest man-made structure for 238 years. Here's an easy one. Everybody knows that one. It's the Eiffel Tower. Does anybody know what the arch is for? Aha, gotcha. The arch was there because that arch was the entrance to the World Trade Fair, or the World Fair of 1890. Eiffel Tower was built in less than 1 year. It was the tallest man-made structure for 41 years. How about this one? That's quite a giant building, isn't it? There we go, Empire State Building. Began construction in 1930. The tallest man-made structure for 36 years. That covers about most of us who were born. This was the tallest building when we were born. How about this one? Another easy one. CN Tower. Construction from 73 to 76 covers off probably the most of the rest of us in the room here. It was the tallest man-made structure for 32 years. And how about this one? The Dubai Tower. Now, we call it the Dubai Tower. They have this weird name for it. I'm not going to try and say it. But it's 2,722 feet tall, and it's still the tallest building in the world. Can anybody tell me what these buildings have in common? Any ideas? They were all the tallest building at one time, but anything else?
A good foundation.
Wow! What is this a picture of? Does anybody know what this is a picture of? In the red there, that's circled? This is the foundation of the previous building we just saw. Now, there's nothing too exciting about that foundation. You're really good. The point I'm trying to make is that we're going to be doing a lot of foundation building tonight. That's going to carry us through the whole series. And foundation building isn't always the most exciting thing. For some people get excited about foundations, like engineers, maybe some architects, maybe some geophysicists or something. You know, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of scientists involved and highly educated people in building this building. So we're doing some foundation building. Now here we have something else. What's this on the right? Anybody know? What's this right here? That's my wife, right there. 5'10". There she is. It kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it? This is called the General Sherman. It's the biggest tree in the world. It began in construction 700 BC, so scientists estimate. They think it's about 2,700 years old. It's 275 feet tall, 36.5 feet wide. The bark is 3 feet thick, and they estimate the trunk weighs 2 million pounds. With all the modern technology we have today, they don't know how much this tree weighs with the limbs. They're estimating the trunk at 2 million pounds.
Where is it?
This is in the Sequoia National Forest in California. It's the only place where these big sequoias grow. Here's a professional photograph of that same tree. Gives a little different perspective. This tree is a foundation which is called the root system. It covers 1 acre, which is 43,560 square feet. The roots go 12 to 14 feet deep. It holds 90,000 cubic feet of soil to anchor its root system in place. They say that root system weighs about 10 million pounds. As fancy as those buildings were, this tree is still alive and growing. Isn't that amazing? I mean, this tree's been through forest fires, it's been through windstorms, it's been through droughts, it's been through everything, and it's still there. And it's alive. And so today's presentation, we're going to be going through Bible health, which is representative of the tree and the science that man has learned about over the years, which is representative of how we build those pretty fancy buildings. It still quite amazes me. So is God concerned about our health? You know, a lot of people think the Bible, we can turn the lights on now, that'd be great, Steve. The Bible is only being a spiritual book giving us instruction in spiritual health. But I'm going to propose that the Bible teaches more than spiritual health. What about physical health? Does it make sense that God only helps us with our spiritual health? If God created mankind, is he going to create us and say, here's what you do for your spiritual health, and your physical health, you're on your own. Just whatever happens, happens. Do what you want. We know that we have physical health. We know that we have spiritual health. Does one aspect of our health affect another aspect of our health? In other words, does physical affect the spiritual, and does spiritual affect the physical? If we look at this child here, we know that the child has a spiritual side to it as well as a physical side. Now, when I say the spiritual side, that takes into account our mental health, which is our mental thinking, our emotional health, our social health. Basically, our spiritual health is our thoughts and feelings. And are those thoughts and feelings geared towards God or away from God? We have that freedom of choice. We can direct our thoughts towards God or away from God. We can do whichever we want. We also have our physical health, which is our physical body. And then we have the environment that is around us, whether we're in a noisy environment or a quiet environment, whether we live in a city environment or out in nature. And then we also know that air, water, sunshine, nutrition, food, all these things affect our health. So why do I think God cares about our physical health? And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. If man is made in the image of God, do you think he would want us to have good physical health? Would he create something that's just meant to fall apart and get sick? I don't think so. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works. So here we're reading that God is telling us that we are his works and we are marvelous. Marvelous things have to have physical health that's healthy, doesn't it? Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper. The word prosper here in the Greek means to succeed in reaching. It doesn't mean you bought a lottery ticket and you get a windfall and you're succeeding. Okay? You'll find throughout the Bible that when God's talking about something, there's always a part for man to play. And so when God is telling us that he wants us to prosper, he's also saying there's a part for us to do, because he's saying that means you've got to succeed in reaching it. And he wants us to be in health. The word health here means to be well, and it also means to be uncorrupt in doctrine. So the point being is the word health looks after the spiritual side and the physical side when you look at the original Greek word. And it also means that you're whole. Okay, we're whole physically, we're whole spiritually, we're one complete human being. Even as thy soul prospers. We definitely want our soul to prosper, because the Greek word here for soul is breathe. And if you're not breathing, you're not too healthy, are you? No? Yes? We're going to look at some Greek words here from the New Testament. The word whole is sozo. And it means to heal, which is the physical side. To save. As Christians, we often think, you will say we're a saved Christian, okay? I'm a saved man or a saved woman. That's the spiritual side, and it means to make whole. So whenever you read the word whole in the New Testament, think, you don't have to think sozo, but think complete. God wants us spiritual health and physical health. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood, she was bleeding for 12 years, came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, she's thinking, if I may just touch his garment, I will be whole. Whole means physical health, spiritual health. But Jesus turned about him, and when he saw her, he said, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith has made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that very hour. She's healed physically and spiritually. And here's some more text you can look up later. Here's another Greek word, diazozo. I'm not much of a Greek, but I'm doing my best. And this Greek word, same thing. It means to save thoroughly, completely, to heal, and to make perfectly whole. Again, we see the spiritual side and we see the physical side. And here's an example. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all that country round about and brought him unto him all that were diseased. The word diseased here in the Greek means physical disease and moral disease, evilness and sickness. Okay, so it encompasses both. And besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. As many as touched him were made perfectly whole. Here again, whole physically and spiritually. Here's another Greek word that is used for the word whole, and it's hugies. And guess what? It means to be healthy and to be true in doctrine. So again, we see the spiritual side and the physical side in the word whole. Insomuch that the multitude wondered when they saw the dumb to speak and the maimed to be whole, the lame to walk, and the blind. Here, blind, again, in the Greek, means physically blind or mentally blind. Again, we see the combination that in this word there's physical and there's spiritual together. Are we starting to get an aspect that if we see that God cares about our physical health? Physical health. Here's some more examples that you can look up later. And one more, hugiaino. There's a Greek word for you. And again, that's the word whole, and it means to have sound health and to be true in doctrine. And here's an example of that in the Bible. And Jesus answering said unto them, They that are whole, they've got sound health and they're sound spiritually, they don't need a physician. But they that are sick, and sick means physically or morally sick, or evil or diseased. The word salvation in the Bible is used about 160 times. I might have been off, but when I counted 160. Correct me if I'm wrong, as you want to do your own counting. In the Old Testament, the word salvation is used 119 times. 65 times, it's the word in the Hebrew called Yahuah. And it means and physical victory or healing. Now, most Christians are very familiar with the word salvation, but probably most Christians aren't realizing that the meaning of it deals with the spiritual side of the human being as well as the physical. It means to have spiritual healing with victory over sin and to have physical healing with victory over disease. So 65 times out of 119, which is over half, when you read the word salvation in the Old Testament, this is what it means. This is what God wants for us. He wants us to be healed completely, physically and spiritually. In the New Testament, salvation is used 44 times. 39 times it's the word soteria. And guess what it means? It means spiritual and physical victory or healing. Spiritual victory, spiritual healing with victory over sin, and physical healing with victory over disease. It says and means the same thing as the Hebrew word in the Old Testament, Yahuah. This is what God wants for us, to be completely healed. Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. So here again, this is Jesus. We're talking about the salvation of Jesus. It means physically healed and spiritually healed. And the words must be saved means to be delivered. We think of being delivered from sin as Christians. And it means to be healed physically and to be made whole. Here's another example. And Jesus said unto him, This day is salvation come unto this house, for so much as he also is a son of Abraham. This is talking about Zacchaeus when he's coming down from the tree. So who heals us? I am the Lord that healeth. It means to cure or to make whole. Again, the spiritual side and the physical side. I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O God, I beseech thee. And the Lord will take away from thee all sickness. The word sickness here in the Hebrew means anxiety. Is anxiety spiritual or physical? Is it with our mind or is it with our body? Okay, so it's a spiritual side, right? What about grief? It's with our mind, right? But disease, we think of the physical problem, right? Who forgiveth all thine iniquities or sin, and who healeth all thy diseases. He healeth the broken in heart, and bindeth up their wounds. For I will restore health unto thee, and I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith the Lord. Behold, I will bring it health. Here the word health means wholeness. And cure, and I will cure them, and will reveal unto them the abundance of peace and truth. And Jesus said unto him, I will come and heal him. And Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. Who is the one who heals us? God. Here we're seeing that God heals us. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. And it came to pass on a certain day as he was teaching, there were Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by, which were come out of every town of Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was present to heal them. Praise the Lord. Isn't that amazing? God obviously really cares about our health, because look at all these verses where God says he's going to heal us. Now in this series I'm going to propose that each and every aspect of our health to a great degree affects every other area of our health. And when one area is out of balance, we cannot have whole health or be complete. I'm going to be presenting topics from different areas of health from the point of science, research, and studies. And you're going to see that I'll be showing how the above from science only verifies what God's Word has already told us. True science, especially in the area of health, always affirms God's Word. So God wants us to have whole health. Whole in the New Testament is used with 4 different Greek words, and they all mean to be spiritually and physically healed. 55% of the Old Testament, when you read the word salvation, it means to be spiritually and physically healed. And 89% of the time, when you see the word salvation in the New Testament, it means to be spiritually and physically healed. So the Bible is our basic instruction before leaving earth. I like to refer to the Bible as our owner's manual. How many of us read and make sure we fully understand every part of an owner's manual before we begin using a new product we've purchased? People are chuckling. Is it that bad, Bruno? Or have we ever tried to put something together or use something new and ran into problems, and then as a last resort, we pull out the owner's manual and we start looking for help? Am I the only man that's ever done that? Come on, man. Okay. God has given this incredible owner's manual called the Bible. So tonight we're going to be looking at genetics. Is it possible to turn good genes on and turn bad genes off? But I've got bad genes. Have you ever heard someone say, I've got bad genes? You know? I've got this gray hair problem because I got bad genes. That's probably true. My mom was totally gray at 30, so I'm doing a little bit better. But how easy is it? Because science has conditioned us to think that if we have a health problem, whatever that health problem is, we say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. It's not my fault because I've got bad genes, right? Our DNA, specifically the 25,000 genes identified by the Human Genome Project, is now widely regarded as the instruction book for the human body. But genes themselves need instructions for what to do and where and when to do it. And the reason is because a human liver cell is the same as a brain cell in the DNA. The DNAs are perfectly identical. The DNA in the brain, the DNA in the liver, it's identical. But do they do different things? Definitely. So there has to be something that's coding, like a computer code, to say how come it's going to do this for the liver, but do this for the brain. Same DNA, same genes. These instructions are found not on the letters of the DNA itself, but on it, in an array of chemicals, markers, and switches known collectively as the epigenome that lie along the length of the double helix. So if we look here, you see this here, and up here. This is the double helix of a human gene, okay? It is along this, what I call gene highway, that these markers and switches are on. So we want to think of this as the code that allows the genes to work. So when we have, let's say you're walking along the highway here and you want to get off on this exit because you want to go shopping at Costco. So you want to go on the exit, but there's a sign here and the sign says, sorry, closed. Can't exit here. Or you might go a little bit down to the next exit and oh, there's a sign there and it says open, you can exit here, and off you go. And so all along this double helix of the DNA are these switches or markers. They don't know how many there's. Tens of thousands of millions of markers and switches along this highway. And we have the ability to turn these switches off and on. Isn't that amazing? The epigenome is just as critical as the DNA to the healthy development of organisms, humans included. So as important as all of these inside the DNA, all of this stuff here is super important. This on the outside that allows access to make these do different things is just as important. God's kingdom is based upon freedom of choice. Does anybody agree with that? Okay, does God force us to do something? No, it's a freedom of choice. So we as humankind, we have freedom of choice. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest eat freely, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. So he's saying, you can eat of all these trees, but don't eat of that one. But did man have the choice of that one? Choose to eat from that tree? Yes, he did. Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee, thou shouldest not eat? Here God is asking Adam a question. And listen to what Adam says. The woman whom thou gavest me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. So who was Adam blaming here? No, who's he blaming? He's talking to God. He's blaming God. He says, God, you gave me the woman. It's your fault. And the Lord said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent. It's the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. So the woman's blaming who? The serpent. Blaming the serpent. Okay? The point I'm making here is it's natural for us as human beings that when something goes wrong, we want to blame something else, someone else. We want it not to be our problem. Okay? The problem is we tend to do that with our health, don't we? Right? I got bad genes. It's not my fault. Girdle and Waterland's experiment was a benchmark demonstration of the epigenome is sensitive to cues from the environment. More and more researchers are finding out that an extra bit of a vitamin or a toxin or a brief dose of mothering love can tweak the epigenome and thereby alter the software of the genes in ways that affect an individual's body and brain for how long? For life. The even greater surprise is the recent discovery that the epigenetic signals from the environment can be passed from one generation on to the next. sometimes for several generations without changing a single sequence of the genes or the DNA. I'm a jealous God, punishing the children for any sins their parents pass on to them to the third and yes, even the fourth generation of those who hate me, but I am unswervingly loyal to those thousands who love me and keep my commandments. If you would have gone up to a geneticist when they first learned about DNA, I don't know how long that was, 50 years ago, 80 years ago, and you would have told them that something that your father did, so your father smoked, he's going to have a switch on the gene that opens up, and now you're going to be predisposed to want to smoke. They'd say, you're crazy that you can turn this switch off and on. But here in the Bible, we're seeing it can be passed to the third and fourth generation. God knew we were going to be learning this kind of science in our age. What's eye-opening is the growing body of evidence that suggests the epigenetic changes wrought by one's diet, their behavior, your surroundings, your environment. They work their way into the gene line and they echo far into the future. Put simply, as bizarre as it may sound, what you eat or smoke today could affect the health and behavior of your great-grandchildren. A second well-understood form of epigenetic signaling is called DNA methylation, which involves the addition of a methyl group, a carbon plus 3 hydrogen atoms to particular bases in the DNA sequence. That's my one line of science. I don't understand it. This interferes with the chemical signals that would put the genes into action and thus effectively silences the gene. What do I mean by that? Baylor College of Medicine obstetrician and geneticist Ignatia, she says that once we understand the connection between our epigenome and disease, epigenome cancer, lifelong methylation diets may be the trick to staying healthy. And this is what it means. It means along this highway where we have all these switches, just think about every millimeter there's another switch. And that switch can either be open, and let's say that switch is open. And let's say that switch says when I'm open, I'm opened, lung cancer. But when that switch is closed, I now cause lung cancer. Okay? So all along this highway are all these switches. And we can turn these switches on and off, that's what the scientists now know, with what's called a methylation diet. Food-specific nutrients that have the ability to travel along this highway, and that nutrient go, oh, Dwayne's got a switch here that's open, says he's going to get lung cancer. I can close that. Oh, up here. Oh, here's a switch. If I turn the switch on, Dwayne's going to live to be 140. Yeah, let's turn that switch on. You see what's happening here? That's what the nutrients we know now can do. That's what scientists is teaching us. If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I've brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. Here God is saying, you do what I say to do, and what I teach you in health, and you're going to be free from disease. Up until epigenetics, science said that was fallacy. But now epigenetics is saying, you know what? If you are on the right methylation diet, we can stay healthy. You don't have to get sick. Isn't that amazing? Epigenetic researchers around the globe are rallying behind the idea of doing a human epigenome project, just like that human DNA project they did several years ago. And they want to map the entire epigenome. So what does that mean? The Human Genome Project, they sequenced 3 billion pairs of nucleotide bases in the human DNA. So, 10, 20 years ago, they figured out 3 billion pairs, and now they say that was a piece of cake compared to trying to map the epigenetic genome. Isn't that amazing? The Epigenome Project is much more difficult than the Human Genome Project. Maybe they may not even finish it in our lifetime. I don't know. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even unto the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Are we getting pretty knowledgeable now as scientists? I'm not a scientist. I'm not speaking about myself, believe me. Scientists, it's amazing what scientists are learning now. We are definitely in this time of knowledge being increased, which means we're in the time of the end. What we inherit from our parents are chromosomes, and chromosomes are only 50% of the DNA. The other 50% is made up of protein molecules, and these proteins carry the epigenetic marks and information. Discover Magazine did a really neat write-up on epigenetics. And they go on to say that they accidentally discovered an epigenetic effect in rats that lasts for at least 4 generations. Skinner was studying how commonly used agricultural fungicide was introduced into the pregnant mother rats, affecting the development of the testes of the fetal rats. And he was not surprised to discover that the male rats exposed to the high doses of chemicals while they were in the womb had low sperm counts. He expected that, but he was surprised when they tested the male rats in subsequent generations, the grandsons of the exposed mothers. And although the pesticide had not changed one letter of their DNA, the second generation offspring had low sperm counts. The same was true for the next generation, the great-grandsons, as well as the great-great-grandsons had the same problem, even though they were not exposed to the agricultural fungicide. It was from their great-great-great-grandmother. Such results hint at a seemingly anti-Darwin aspect of heredity. This is a very worldly, Darwin-promoting magazine. And they had to admit that this epigenetics is so profound, it almost hints that the Darwinism could have never happened because epigenetics proves against it. Through epigenetic alterations, our genomes retain something like a memory of the environment, signals received during the lifetime of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and perhaps even our distant ancestors. So far, the definitive studies have involved only rodents, but researchers are turning up evidence suggesting that the epigenetic inheritance may be at work in humans as well. This was written 8 years ago. They have a lot more new science that I just haven't read yet. Who knows what they've found out now. The advent of epigenetics offers a new twist and perhaps an opportunity to understand with more nuance how nature and nurture society we live in today and how we might change it for tomorrow. If environment has a role to play in changing our genome, then we've bridged the gap between social processes and the biological processes that will change the way we look at everything. When you read the context of this whole article, what they're saying is that survival of the fittest could have never happened genetically, what we know now with epigenomes. It's impossible. It shuts down all those theories that they had. Until recently, the pattern of an individual's epigenome was thought to be firmly established during the early fetal development, although that is still a critical period. Lately discovered that the epigenome can change in response to the environment throughout an individual's life. So depending on your social interaction, how you're thinking, the environment you live in, whether it's in the city or the country, what you're eating, everything about your life can be turned on or off throughout your life. Epigenetics is proving to have some responsibility for the integrity of our genome. So we can no longer say, I inherited it from my parents, that's just the way I am. Journal says, before genes predetermined outcomes, now everything we do, everything we eat, can affect our gene expression and that of future generations. Epigenetics introduces the concept of free will into our idea of genetics. Again, this is a quote directly from Discover Magazine. They are promoting evolution. But they realize now that epigenetics proves that God has given us what? Freedom of choice in everything that happens to us. What do you think of this cute little guy? No, you can't have him for a pet, Kirsten. We're going to tell the fat yellow mouse story. This fat yellow mouse is genetically bred to have a yellow coat, become obese quickly, develop diabetes, and then quickly die of cancer. Are these identical twins, yes or no? They are identical genetically in every way. Their DNA is absolutely 100% identical, but health-wise they are very different. It is not our genes that predetermine us to the disease process. It is the epigenetic markers along the highway on the outside of the DNA that determines the disease process, whether the switch is turned on or off. Back in 2000, Randy Girdle, a professor of radiation oncology at Duke University, and his postdoctoral student Robert Waterland designed a groundbreaking genetic experiment that was simplicity in itself. They wondered, is it possible to take genetically identical mice but feed them different diets than what their mothers had? They started off with pairs of fat yellow mice known to scientists as agouti mice. I mean, scientists use these mice all the time because they just know they're always the same, generation after generation. So they called, because they were carried a particular gene, the agouti gene, that in addition to making the rodents ravenous and yellow, renders them prone to cancer and diabetes. Give some of these mice different amounts of superfoods so we can change their offspring's genes so that these mice will have different genes than that of their fat yellow mothers. That's what these two doctors were trying to figure out they could do. So typically when the agouti mice breed, most of the offspring are identical to their parents, just as yellow, as fat as pincushions, and susceptible to life-shortening disease as in the other agouti mouse. The parent mice in Girdle and Waterland's experiment, however, produced a majority of offspring that looked altogether different. These young mice were slender and mousy brown. After one generation, these fat yellow mice were giving birth to brown, lean mice that did not go on to develop obesity, they did not go on to develop diabetes, they did not die of cancer, and they lived to a ripe old age. They were spry. I don't know if mice need canes or not, but when these mice died, they had full faculties of their physical body until they died. Not like today. How many people, the last 10, 20, 30 years of their life, were getting crippled, were in walkers, where we can't do this, we can't do that. These mice were spry till the day they died. The effects on the agouti gene had been virtually erased. The researchers effected this transformation without altering a single letter of the mouse's DNA. The researchers, they were so excited, they thought they were now able to get rid of bad genes. They thought they could actually take these genes and change them. They really believed that they'd found the fountain of youth. They thought, these two doctors thought, that they were going to win the Nobel Prize because they figured out they knew how to change and alter genetic code. So they went in and looked at the genes only to discover that they had not changed at all. They were quite disappointed. They looked around and thought, well, we've got to look around and find out what's happening because they know the mice are different. What changed? If the genes were the same, what changed? And out of this came the science that we call today epigenetics, things that influence how genes work. They found that there was a triggering mechanism on the outside of the gene that was able to switch off the genes that made the mice have the yellow coat, switch off the gene that gave them the ability to get fat and be obese, switch off the gene that gave them diabetes, switch off the disease of cancer so they no longer died of cancer. Just take that switch and, just like the light switch, just turn it off. It was a little eerie and a little scary to see how something as subtle as a nutritional change in the pregnant mother rat could have such a dramatic impact on the gene expression of the baby. Girdle says, the results showed how important epigenetic changes could be. From left to right is the difference of the amount of superfoods these mice were fed and how they subsequently turned out because of the amount of superfood they were fed as opposed to being fed a normal mouse diet. Can you see any changes going left to right? Remember we talked about methylation earlier? Methylation is foods that allow and have the ability to turn those switches off if they're bad and turn them on if they're good. Okay? Here's a list of some of the foods that are called methyl donors that have the ability to do that job, to turn off bad genes and turn on good genes. Now, a diet rich in methyl donors needs to have very specific vitamins and minerals to drive the methylation pathway along that highway on the outside of the DNA of that double helix. And those nutrients are zinc, B2, magnesium, B6, B12, and folate. Those nutrients are the most important nutrients for turning off bad genes and turning on good genes because this gene is what's called the methylation process. And this methylation that has the ability to turn those switches on and off on the gene. Poor diet, poor probiotic status, digestive issues, medications, medical conditions like Crohn's or celiac, and other genetic traits may cause any or all of these nutritional deficiencies. Xenobiotics, it's chemicals that we find in our food, in our water, in our workplace, in our homes, in our schools. xenobiotics can shut down the methylation pathway. That's not good, is it? If that pathway is shut down, you can take all the nutrients you want, you're in trouble. Taking medications deplete you of the nutrients above that we listed. Some of the worst offenders are here listed in the yellow. Those drugs shut down the methylation pathway. Drinking alcohol pretty much shuts down methylation and wipes out your glutathione stores. The king of antioxidants is glutathione. It neutralizes free radicals, helps the liver remove chemicals that are foreign to the body, such as drugs and pollutants. It's called the master of the immune system. Glutathione is what keeps you healthy. If you look at a hospital situation, at people who have cancer, AIDS, or any other serious disease, almost invariably they are depleted in glutathione. And this is a glutathione expert. That's what they study. It's the most important molecule you need to stay healthy and prevent disease. This is by Mark Hyman. He's a medical doctor. Again, talking about glutathione. Now, this chemical here is a potent neurotoxin released by Candida. Anybody heard of Candida? Yeast infections, right? Not good. But it's also a byproduct of drinking alcohol, including red wine. So, all these things shut down the methylation pathway. Their wine is the poison of dragons and cruel venom of asps. Wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. No man, having drunk old wine, straightway desires new, for he saith, the old is better. Let's look at the second quote here from the Luke 5:39. If someone is drinking alcohol, fermented wine or wheat or whatever it happens to be, they don't desire new. Why? Because in the Bible we read about new wine and old wine. In the Bible doesn't differentiate between wine that is fermented and wine that is fresh pressed out of the grape cluster. And so here we're seeing that anybody who's drinking fermented wine, they don't want to have fresh squeezed out of the cluster grape juice. Because what good is that going to do them? They want to get what? They want to get more punched. So they don't want new wine. He says that what is better? The old is better. And saith unto him, every man at the beginning doth set out good wine, and when men are well drunk, then that which is worse. But thou hast kept the good wine until now. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him. Now let's think about this for a minute. Okay, so we put out some wine. Let's say it was made last year, and people are drinking that wine. So they say is they set out the good wine first, and then we bring out the worst wine later. Would it be a big deal if there's a wedding and there's some alcoholic wine there, for me to walk over to the neighbor's house and say, I'm going to go get the good wine now? You know that stuff that was made 300 years ago? You know the stuff that costs $1,000 a bottle? I'm going to go get that 300-year-old wine, and I'm going to bring that over. Would that be a miracle? Would that be a miracle? Would that, from Jesus' point of view, this is the first miracle that Jesus did. Is there a miracle in that? No, there's no miracle in that. Anybody can do that. So this, once again, verifies that alcohol has two meanings in the Bible, or wine has two meanings in the Bible. It's either fermented, because it's old, or it's new, fresh out of the cluster. The point I'm trying to make is, we now know from that methylation pathway, the scientists can prove unequivocally that alcohol shuts down the methylation pathway. That's bad. That's real bad. One drink will shut down the methylation pathway. Green coffee bean extract is incredibly high in catechols. It also is catechols are in coffee and cocoa and beer, and these use up your methylation pathway nutrients really fast. So when we eat these types of things or drink these types of things, the nutrients that we need to turn on the good genes and turn off the bad genes, they all get used up by these products that we put into our body. If you have Lyme's disease, it shuts down the methylation pathway. If you take nutrients that deplete methyl groups like high doses of niacin, or the prescription version that's called slow niacin or niaspan, those drugs shut down the methylation pathway. Mercury toxicity may disrupt this cycle, making it practically unsolvable until the metals are removed. So if you have mercury toxicity or other heavy metal toxicity in your body, you can pretty well guarantee these pathways are shut down permanently until you get those toxic metals out of your body. So you can eat all the nutrients you want, all the health food you want, all the fresh fruit and vegetables you want. If you don't get those poisons out of your body, that methylation pathway is in need of bad repair. You're probably going to get quite sick. So when we think of heavy metals, we think of mercury, we think of cadmium and smoke, high copper, arsenic. These are the kind of things that shut down the methylation pathway. Anxiety or a lot of stress shuts down the methylation pathway. Think about this for a minute now. We're told in the Bible, as a man thinketh, so is he. In other words, if we're having angry thoughts, okay, the science tells us it's shutting down the methylation pathway. You're going to get sick. 50 years ago, science would have said you're whacked out if you think that because someone gets angry, they're going to shut down the ability for their genes to function properly and they're going to get ill. Science is just reconfirming what the Bible already told us. Because people with a methylation difficulty have trouble eliminating poisons, these build up in their body, and that's what contributes to many health concerns. Opening up the methylation roadblocks helps clear your body of poisons that should help reduce whatever symptoms you're having from whatever disease you have. If you can't methylate properly, you can't produce CoQ10, you can't produce keratin, creatine, or ATP, which is your energy. That's also, you also have what's termed as neuropathy. Has anybody ever heard of neuropathy? Okay, it's pain that is caused, now they know why it's caused, because the methylation process isn't working properly, and it's the methylation process that puts the protective wrapping around the nerve so that it doesn't create the pain. So if you got like an open nerve that's exposed, you're going to have neuropathy. A lot of times people have neuropathic, I can't even say it, pain, and the scientists don't know what to do. They give you all these medications, but it doesn't fix the problem. The problem is you need to have the protective layer around it, which comes from the food, the healthy food that God gave us. If you're gluten-free or limit your intake of grains, you may be low in B6. B6 is important to help drive the transsulfuration cycle, which means you may be low in your master antioxidant, which is the glutathione. Okay? So B6 is very, very important for your glutathione to be produced in the body. So, methyl donors to make the switches turn on the good genes and turn off the bad genes are things like folate, highly, highly important for good health. And I've got a list here of foods that are high in folate. This will be in your notes that I'm going to hand out after the meeting. The important thing to remember is, let's say we're looking at 400 to 500 milligram or micrograms. Great Northern beans is going to have more than lima beans, so I put them in order from highest to lowest as you're looking through the list. Here's a quote from an article of the LA Times. Adding folic acid to flour, pastas, and rice has reduced the rate of spina bifida and anencephalia in the U.S., sparing 1,000 babies each year from these devastating birth defects. That's good or bad? That's good, right? Okay. But a recent study suggests that those health gains from the folic acid come at a cost with an extra 15,000 cases of colon cancer annually just in the United States, caused from folic acid. Folic acid does not exist in any food, just so you know that, okay? It's a chemical that's made in a factory. Folic acid, fortification started heavily in 1992. Autism began to rise quickly in 1993, and in the 10 years between 1993 and 2003, the number of American school children with autism diagnosis increased by over 800% in the same 10-year period that they started heavily fortifying processed foods with folic acid. Autism began to rise at the same time as autism. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration mandated that you have to add folic acid to every enriched cereal grain product by January 1998. Folate deficiency is believed to be the most common vitamin deficiency in the world due to food processing, because we don't eat food the way that God grew it anymore. We eat it processed. We take half the nutrients out, or even sometimes more, 3/4 or 80 or 90%. Drugs that are known to inhibit the body's ability to utilize folate. If folate is one of the most important things for turning the switches off and on, we don't want to be having things shut down the folate. Aspirin does that, cholesterol-lowering drugs, oral birth control pills, antacids, all kinds of drugs shut down the body's ability to use folate. If your doctor has prescribed you folic acid, ask your doctor if you can take folonic acid, which is the natural, or calcium folinate, or methylfolate. Those are natural forms of folate. Folic acid is not natural. And here's a website with more information about that. This will be in your notes as well. Throw away all your folic acid enriched foods. It is not healthy for you. These are processed foods that are cereals, breads, pastas, energy bars, drinks, snacks that the government has mandated you have to add the folic acid into because they took the folate out, which was in there naturally. Throw out all folic acid containing supplements and instead eat folate-rich foods, what God gave us. And this is recommended by Dr. Ben Lynch, who has made it his life study to be an epigenetic methylation expert, and he teaches this to medical doctors all over the world because he knows how bad folic acid is. Okay? And so magnesium is another important thing of having methyl donors to turn on the good genes, turn off the bad ones. Here's the foods that they're in and their amounts. Again, this will be in your notes. Zinc, as well as B2, B6, B12. Click, click, click. Don't worry, all those lists are in your notes I'm going to give you tonight. We're going to end tonight by talking about me. Is that okay? You know, I had the privilege of growing up here in Alberta where there's lots of mountains and beautiful lakes, lots of nature, and my father had a love for the mountains. And because of that, as a young boy starting back in the 1960s, he would take me on long backpacking trips into the mountains, and we'd go back there for 3, 4, 5, 6 days at a time. And I loved it. But then around the early to mid-1970s, we were coming out of a lake one time. There's a bunch of us, but just the two of us were on the trail together. My dad says, Dwayne, he said, your brothers aren't going to be able to do what you and I are doing. And I didn't quite understand. I was about 9, 10 years old at the time. I didn't quite understand that. So what do you mean my brothers aren't going to be able to do what we're doing, go out here in the mountains and backpacking and sleeping in tents and fishing and enjoying nature? I didn't really quite understand it. But oh well, you know, life went on. And I noticed that as we started going on more and more backpacking trips, that we're going on less trips every year. And I noticed my dad was starting to take a lot of heavy pain medications for the arthritis in his knees. In fact, it got so bad that no matter how much medication he took, he couldn't go hiking anymore. And by the age of 40, he no longer hiked anymore. But my dad knew this was happening. And he knew he had to have something that he could do with his boys to phase us out of hiking and backpacking in these beautiful mountains. These are all areas that where my dad used to take me, all these pictures. And what else could he do with his boys? So my dad thought, well, we're going to build a motorboat. So my dad and I, we built a motorboat. And I quickly forgot about hiking in the mountains. This was exciting for a boy of my age to be able to build a motorboat with his father. And so my dad very neatly transitioned all his 6 boys from, instead of hiking and backpacking, to now going in the boat and going fishing and water skiing and all these wonderful things. I didn't think much about it. He phased it in pretty seamlessly. We're going to fast forward now to the 1980s. I'm out on a hike with 2 friends, one the same age as me, and a friend of mine, Dr. Carl Reach. He would have been about late 60s, early 70s at the time. And we're hiking for the day, and all of a sudden I started to get this pain in my knees. And it got worse, and worse, and worse. And it got so bad that I couldn't walk. And these 2 men had to carry me the last 2 miles of this hike. But I was only in my 20s. My dad quit hiking when he was 40. I thought, there's no way I'm going to let this beat me. And I started working out harder in the gym, and I started taking all kinds of supplements because I didn't want to have to be getting older and be in a cane and then maybe a wheelchair because the arthritis in my knees was so bad I wouldn't be able to walk. So I forgot about it. Life got busy. I got busy with my business. And then I met my lovely wife Carol, and we went with a group of us, about 30 or 40 of us, to go for a little nice day hike up to Ribbon Creek Falls. Anybody ever been up to Ribbon Falls? Okay, it's really flat, right? It's a nice flat hike. It's a little bit long, but it's really easy. Anybody can do it, right? Well, on the way out, everybody's hiking along, and I start slowing down, and slower and slower. 2 hours later, after everybody's already back enjoying the nice picnic at the parking lot, you know, they were getting ready to send out the rescue crew. Say, where's Dwayne? Because I couldn't walk. The pain was so bad. The next day, the same group of 30 to 40 people, they went whitewater rafting, but guess what Dwayne did? I sat in the car. Because for several days, I was out of commission. So, again, I forgot about it. I got busy. Years went by. Did some camping with some friends up in Kananaskis. We said, oh, let's go for a little walk around the lake. Well, about 3/4 of the way around the lake, I'm going, this is getting bad. And I was no way I was going to say, Wally, you know, he says, look, I say, Wally, you're going to carry me out? There's no way. Already the girls said, we're waiting here. You're going to get the car and come get us. We're not walking anymore. But I made it out. And guess what? For the next couple days, I was out of commission. So, based on what we saw, do I still have arthritis in my knees? Do I still have a problem hiking long distances? We will find out tomorrow night when I finish the story. Please come back and bring your friends.